Hi patrons, welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial series. So in the first part we did the eyes, and now in this second part we're going to focus on just doing the nose. So we're going to be using very similar colours to the skin tones that we used for the skin around the eyes. So just keep those ones that you use for the eyes. We're not going to be using any real different ones for the nose. So the first thing that I want to do is just lighten up the sketch a bit, just like these markings where I marked out where the highlights and the shadows are going to be. Just lighten them up a tiny bit. And so the first thing that I want to do is go in with my Prismacolor brown pencil and use this to block in the darkest areas, which is the nostrils, so this shadow down here and around the nose. I'm applying a bit more pressure on the darkest areas. And just lightly shading some of the other shadowed areas that aren't quite as dark. Okay, so now I want to go in with the burnt sienna. I just need to sharpen it, and I'm going to use that to do some more of the shadows, like the lower part of the nose. Just make sure your pencils are nice and sharp and just shade in some shadow there. I'm not applying much pressure at this stage. So look at how it sort of works and connects with the skin that we've previously done. Now I'm going in with the burnt ochre. Again, give this a little sharpen. And shade these shadowed areas, the darkest areas of the nose that are orange sort of toned. If they're shadowed but they're more yellow toned, then use the darker brown ochres rather than the burnt ochres. Apply a bit more pressure in the darker areas, or the areas that are a bit more sort of saturated with this colour. I'm going to go over it with a bit more burnt sienna as well in this area. Okay, so now what I want to do is get in some more of these mid-toned values. So I'm going to go in with the burnt ochre 50%. And also the brown ochre 50%, so these two colours. And we're going to start to work on burnishing some colours. So let's start with the brown ochre 50%, and this is mainly going to go over on this side. So anywhere that's a bit more yellow toned, use this shade. I'm going to go over with a bit of burnt ochre 50% as well. And over here. Going to add a bit of burnt sienna where those highlighted areas are, the burnt sienna 10%. Now I'm using the brown ochre 50%, and I'm leaving out the most highlighted areas. So now I'm going to go in with the brown ochre 10% for that little lighter area over here. I want to do the same thing for the middle area, which is more highlighted. And this lighter area over here. I'm applying some brown ochre around the sides of the nose apart from the middle, which is a bit more highlighted. Bring it up here as well. Get in the burnt ochre 50% as well. It's warmer on this sort of side. Going to add some of the burnt ochre to these more shadowed areas on the sides, darken them up. Now going over some of these shadows with the burnt ochre. Add a bit more burnt sienna for these darkish shadows. Now let's fill in this highlighted area with the brown ochre 10%. And also a bit of the burnt ochre 10% as well. Even it out a bit, especially towards the bottom. Now let's work on adding some of the brown ochre across the middle. Brown ochre 50% that is. Easing it into the highlight as well. Okay, let's add some burnt ochre 50% over the middle as well. Add some of the burnt ochre. So I'm just working on getting the shape of the shadows a bit more accurate. There's some slight little shadows within this lighter area. You can add some of the burnt ochre 10%. So I'm going to use the burnt ochre to get in some more of the shadows on the right hand side. Get the shape of these shadows in a bit more. Just using the brown ochre now to darken up some of these highlighted areas. Okay, so now I want to actually lighten up the highlights in the middle, just kind of reshape it. Just using the white pencil very lightly. I'm not pushing down hard at all. Add a brighter highlight down there. Go over it with the burnt sienna at 10%. I'm going to go in actually with a bit of anthraquinoid pink as well. More of a healthy pink glow on top of the highlighted areas. I want to go back in with that dark brown and fix the shape of these areas around it, around the nose. So I'm getting in some of these darker shadows as well, up the nose and around here. I'm going to add a bit of the colour russet as well, because this area is a bit more saturated down here. There's a bit more sort of red tints to it. Gonna add a bit of the burnt ochre over these shadowed areas that we've added, and also some of the burnt sienna. So I'm just adding a bit of the brown ochre 10% just above it where this more highlighted area is, and we're going to add the brown ochre 50% as well. Going with the highlight again. Gonna go in with the burnt sienna now. Gonna go in with the brown ochre and blend that out. Blend over the highlights with the brown ochre as well. And just sort of blend and smooth everything together. Now go back in with the brown ochre 10%. So I'm adding the highlights again with the white. I'm not applying much pressure. I'm just looking for the subtle highlights now. I'm going to add a bit of the russet over this side. Bit of burnt sienna on top. So let's work a bit below the nose now. So let's get our burnt sienna. So I'm getting in the shadows on the crease side of the nose. Blend in between that with the burnt ochre 50%. Go back over it with the burnt sienna. Gonna add a bit of that brown as well, that darker shadow down here. Add a bit of the russet colour. Adding some burnt sienna over the nose here. Now let's go in with the black pencil. Use that for the nostrils. Okay, just add a bit of the russet colour and a bit more of the burnt sienna. Add a bit of burnt ochre 10% for the highlights. And also go over it with a bit of the burnt ochre. Gonna add a bit of russet over here. Blend over some of these shadows with the brown ochre 50%. I want to push down a bit harder to make a few of these highlights a bit brighter, hype up the contrast a bit. I'm going to add a bit more of the russet colour. And a bit more of the burnt ochre. I'm going to apply a bit more pressure on the white pencil again. I'm actually going to erase this black. Add a bit of the russet colour there as well. So we're coming to the end of doing the nose, not too much left to do. Let's just add a bit of value on this side. Let's first go in with the burnt ochre 50%. Gonna add a bit of burnt sienna. Added some burnt sienna and now some burnt ochre. Gonna add some brown ochre. I'm not going to do too much more. Not even going to finish that side off. Do a little more this side as well. Gonna add some russet. Burnish this with the burnt ochre 50% as well. Add a bit of the burnt ochre as well, darken it up. And add a bit of the russet colour. Okay. So now I just want to actually get in the sides of the cheeks. I might as well do that as well in this part. Let's lighten up the sides. To start with, I'm going in with the burnt sienna to get in these darkest shadows. Adding another layer to the darkest areas. I'm going to add a bit of the dark umber now. Really darken up these sides. I'm going to go over the sides a bit with the burnt sienna. And then on the reference you can see that it gets more warm tones, so I'm going to switch over to the burnt ochre. Just give it a sharpen. Gonna add the burnt ochre up here as well. I'm adding a bit of brown ochre 10%, lighten it up a tiny bit. Going to add a bit of the colour Russet as well. Give it more of that saturated look. Switch back over to the burnt sienna to darken it up a bit. Now let's go in with the burnt ochre 50%. Blend over the whole thing with the burnt ochre 50%. Now I'm going to add a bit of the brown ochre 50%. Now I'm just going to blend the highlighted bit out with the brown ochre 10%. And add a bit of burnt ochre 10% as well over it. Now I'm glazing some of the burnt ochre 50%. Just blend it so it's a nice soft transition. I'm going to use the white just to lighten up the brightest part of the highlight, and also to add this bit of a sort of crease. Going to add more burnt ochre. add in more of the colour russet as well. Add some burnt sienna as well. Gonna add a bit more russet. Gonna add a bit more russet on the nose, on the side here. So now onto the cheek over here. So we're going to need a lot of our brown ochres for this. Let's first go in with the brown ochre. So let's section off the highlight. First go in with the burnt sienna. Might give it a little sharpen actually. Just shading in up here. Let's go in with the brown ochre then. Let's add a bit of burnt ochre to that. Gonna add the brown ochre 50% as well. Burnish out with that. I'm going to blend this out with the burnt ochre 50%. So I want to add a bit of burnt sienna 10% to the highlighted area, and then we're going to blend it out with the brown ochre 10%, just give it a little sharpen. Let's blend it out. I'm going to add a bit of the burnt ochre 50%. And some of the brown ochre. Going to use a bit of that brown as well, that Prismacolor brown. I'm just going to fill in the middle bit with the burnt ochre 50% and the little tiny bit in the middle with the brown ochre 10%. Pressing a bit harder to get it nice and light. And up here. And now I'm going to go in with the white pencil on those highlighted areas to get up some brighter highlights. Get a bit more texture in the skin. Gonna add a bit of the brown ochre, 50% over this side now. And a little bit of raw umber, 50%, just to tone down the red a tiny bit so it's not as saturated. Now I'm adding the burnt sienna. And the brown to create a more defined shadow. I'm going to add some of the brown ochre. Okay. So I think that's all I'm going to do really for this part. Just want to add a bit of burnt ochre up here, and I'm going to actually add just a tiny bit of the colour russet. And a bit more of this Prismacolor. So anyway guys, that is it for this part, and I'll see you in the next part where we start working on the mouth. Bye guys!